All right, everyone, it has been a crazy few days. We're recording this on Monday morning. Obviously, there was an assassination attempt on President Donald Trump's life Saturday evening. That came on the heels of talk about Democrats possibly replacing Joe Biden as the head of the Democratic ticket after that rough presidential debate. And we are recording this as the Republican National Convention is set to open in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we are expecting Donald Trump to pick a running mate. So, a lot to cover. And with that in mind, and a lot of serious stuff. So, I wanted to go to a couple of my friends that I've known for a long time, dear friends. Jamie Weinstein, you may know him. He hosts the Monday edition of the Dispatch podcast, and Will Rahn, who's a political journalist. These are both old friends of mine. In fact, we worked together for years at the Daily Caller. So occasionally I refer to us as Daily Ballers. I can't think of anyone else I would want to talk with at this moment where things are really up in the air. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. So with no further ado, Jamie Weinstein and Will Rahn. All right, guys, how you doing today?
Doing splendidly. Thank you for having us.
It's wonderful to see you both. Your shining, beautiful, tanned faces in Matt's case.
I have assembled the posse. We have important stuff to talk about, and we have to start, I think, with the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. A lot's obviously been talked about already, but I'm curious how you think this may or may not impact the contours of the race, right? So one possibility would be that it becomes impossible for Democrats to talk about Donald Trump being an existential threat to liberal democracy. I think another possibility is, frankly, everything moves on astonishingly. Something will happen. There's going to be a running mate that will change the subject. We've got news happening. Will Rahn, what do you think? How does this impact politically speaking?
Uh, this is the kind of instance where I'm extraordinarily wary of making predictions. I'll do some short-term predictions. What we saw with the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, we saw two things. We saw an attempted assassination, and then we saw the fist bump, the fist rise, the fight, fight, fight. Uh, that, reminds certain historically inclined people perhaps of Teddy Roosevelt in that iconic moment as he's running for the third term for the presidency in 1912 and got shot and continued his speech. And it just fed the legend, this myth of this man. And it'll always feed, the Trump legend, whatever that winds up being. We're always going to remember. I mean, that photo is going to be in our kids' history books, our grandkids' history books, whatever they're using instead of books by then. But I expect, I mean, there's still a million ways the Republicans can screw this up. But what I think we've seen over the past 3 weeks or so from Donald Trump's campaign is an extraordinary amount of discipline that we don't usually associate with Donald Trump. We saw this with him just laying low after the debate where Joe Biden imploded late last month. He laid low. He made the conversation the Democrats. He didn't interfere. He let the Democrats squabble and fight. And he let the Democrats attack Biden. And he just stayed off to the sidelines. And then he reappears and he's immediately shot at. And he is defiant as he leaves the stage.
I think, I don't know who said it, maybe it was Frank Luntz of all people, but he's going to have an opportunity to reintroduce himself. I mean, that's what this might allow for him, people to give him a second look. It's unfortunate that, this incident ever took place, but to the extent that because, and I think this is key. I mean, I thought through this, what would, in both scenarios, thank God he would have survived. But in one scenario where he does that iconic photo, in another scenario where he's just rushed from the stage, I think there are kind of two different media cycles almost.
Totally. And let me just say, I think from a Secret Service standpoint, I can't believe they stood him up like that. I mean, he was protected when he was on the ground. That bunting is like steel or something. how did they know that? They're like, yeah, we got the shooter. Well, how do you know there's not a second shooter? How can you be 100% sure? I don't trust these Secret Service to get it right. They obviously didn't get it right to begin with. To stand him up like that, now that gave him the opportunity to have that iconic moment. But that to me seemed, again, I'm not in law enforcement, but that seemed to me a little bit unwise.
Yeah.
I mean, so he's a physically powerful guy. He might have just kind of pushed up through them, and those Secret Service agents. I mean, again, what the hell happened with the Secret Service is its own story, its own scandal, and I mean, we've been seeing these Secret Service scandals now mounting for years, at least since the Obama administration. I mean, it's going to take a very thorough investigation to figure out like how the heck that roof was open, how this person was able to even get these shots off. It's completely insane. But yeah, I think, when we talk about this election, we're talking about two old men. This is the grumpy old man election. And the story is completely about one candidate's frailty and not the other. And for Donald Trump to go out there wounded, grazed by a bullet, bloodied in the face, and yelling, fight, 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 putting his fist up, that fist from the car to announce it's like, I'm okay, I'm still in this. I mean, it's an extraordinarily hard thing for Biden to I mean, nobody, he looks so much stronger. He looks like somebody who, all right, you might think that he's completely insane. You might think that he will usher in fascism in America. However, if you look at these two guys and like, well, which one has vitality right now to last 4 years in office between the debate and the shooting? I don't know. It's kind of hard to make the argument that, Donald Trump is just as old and just as frail as Joe Biden.
But one odd thing, what was in his mind that got him to do that? And I think it's lingering. I mean, there's always all those reports from when he was in the White House during the protests outside the White House, and the Secret Service apparently took him to the bunker, and people were making fun of him. That they had to rush him to the bunker and made him look like a coward. And the White House reporters suggested that really angered Trump, that image of him being rushed to a bunker. Even in this moment, I have to think that was in the back of his mind somehow, that he wanted to show, that image can't be reinforced. It had to be an image of strength. And he did it. I mean, that's, as you said, an iconic photo. That's something our children will learn about.
One thing I don't think that was on Donald Trump's mind, I'm going to take a guess that Charles de Gaulle was not on Donald Trump's mind. But one of the most famous moments in modern French political history was the 1961 or 1962. They tried to kill de Gaulle a bunch of times. But the earliest one was him and his wife in their motorcade, and it was sprayed by bullets. And he ducked. He instinctively, you're in a car and the windows are being shattered by machine gun fire. He ducked, and he was with his wife. And his wife, and I don't know exactly the French idiom that she used, but it was essentially, "You're Charles de Gaulle, sit up in the car." And he did. He just got back up, just immediately. And it looked like this man who was just, it reinforced his war hero reputation, this man of incredible bravery, this man who stands and fights. It reinforces courage. So yeah, that's another historical parallel that came to mind for me.
But one more that just popped up on Twitter, which is actually amazing. Has anyone seen this video of? I didn't know that Prince Charles, now King Charles, was almost attempted to be assassinated, but he was like the most British reaction like ever. Like there's gunshots. He just looks up while he's like fixing with his cufflinks, and looks up as like the shooter is coming to the stage, and the security have to like bump him a little bit, and he's like falls backwards, but barely moves at all. I mean, if you haven't seen that footage, it's pretty remarkable.
And of course, one of the most impressive moments of the George W. Bush administration, how he dodged those shoes. The nadir of his presidency, but, he was still with it. He could still play ball. He was smiling,
Yeah.
People are, in the immediate aftermath of this shooting, you had some people on the left claiming that this was like a setup or a crisis actor type situation. And then you had people on the right, including J.D. Vance, who, as we speak, I guess is currently the front runner to be to be the Donald Trump's running mate, suggests that Democrats and Joe Biden are responsible for this by virtue of the martial rhetoric and by claiming that Trump is a threat to liberal democracy. It may just be, however, that there was a person with mental problems who had an opportunity, and that there wasn't a political motive. I don't know if you've seen the pictures of this alleged shooter. We say alleged, but he looked like a total nerd, and I think bullying may actually be a big part of this story.
Apparently, yeah.
He was also. Did anyone see this? That Blackstone, the financial firm, had a commercial, and the commercial focused on a high school teacher in Pittsburgh and how he can work and do his job, and happy that his investments are handled by Blackstone. And the class that he's teaching, there's 2 clips of the kid in the class. It happens to be the teacher of the kid, so he's in this Blackstone commercial in 2 instances, which is bizarre, and of course feeds into a lot of the conspiracies that I think have no merit, but definitely are permeating.
So, Jamie, just to get you on the record, you believe that Blackstone had a hand in what happened?
No, not at all. I
Okay.
have no problem.
All right, I misunderstood, I guess. But yeah, I mean, you look at like political assassins, and okay, go back to 1963 and the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and a lot was made of just kind of the atmosphere in the South at the time. Adlai Stevenson, who was Jack Kennedy's ambassador to the United Nations, had been roughed up in Dallas a few months before. There was the famous wanted for treason ads in the South. You had a lot of animus against the Kennedys in the South for old-fashioned bigoted reasons, because the Kennedys were liberals, particularly on civil rights issues. But ultimately, I mean, if you subscribe to the mainline theory of JFK's assassination, it was, done by a guy who was like a Marxist, but who didn't have a clear political rationale for doing it. A lot of, political assassinations, like John Wilkes Booth, we have a good understanding of why he shot Abraham Lincoln. But the assassin, the man who tried to kill George Wallace, wasn't a huge civil rights campaigner, I believe. I don't think that. It was just, kind of a demented person in a hotel room thinking stuff up, who then became the inspiration, the like iconic American would-be assassin, at least in American film, is Robert De Niro's character, Travis Bickle, in Taxi Driver.
Which inspired John Hinckley, right?
Yeah, which helped. He was based on the guy who shot George Wallace in part, and then it inspired Hinckley. Again, another guy who didn't have clear political motivations. He wanted to impress Jodie Foster or whatever. So, I mean, I don't think there's any reason did they find a stack of New Republics in his house? If they do,
the Gabby Giffords one comes to mind, just because.
Yeah, that was another guy who was just a complete. He was not there. Yeah,
and conservatives, pushed back at the time because people were saying, "Oh, Palin, said an ad, we're targeting this race or something like this candidate," meaning that obviously they want to defeat them, and how could you put a bullseye? So I guess by the standards that had once been set, people are saying, well, if you're saying you have a target on them to beat them, which I guess some people said about Trump as well, then you're responsible. Of course, there's been overheated rhetoric. I do not think saying that Trump poses some risk to democracy, maybe not 100% risk, but certainly a tail risk there, given what we saw on January 6th, is something that you can prevent opponents from saying because it's true. Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. But if Joe Biden can't say that, I'm not sure what his campaign is, because that seemed to be his entire campaign.
He has to say it. He has to find a way to say it. I mean, I think logically, there's no real problem with saying the assassination attempt on Donald Trump was a horrific thing that never should have happened. And also, Donald Trump's actions before, around, and after January 6th were abhorrent and tantamount to, attempting to essentially overthrow the United States government. I think you can make both of these
You
arguments
can.
simultaneously.
No, you can, and I think statesmen should, but there is also, it's not a logical leap to say, like, if you believe that Donald Trump is a dictator in waiting and a strongman who tried to overturn an election and stay in office,
Yeah.
what do you do with people like that? What should happen to people like that? And it's a similar rationale that I think the January 6th rioters had, right? If you truly believe that Joe Biden and the left were stealing your country and stealing an election, wouldn't you show up at the Capitol and, whatever, try to stop it from happening? Like, there is a
I mean,
certain...
that's how Donald Trump defended them. I mean, that's just like, it's like, well, this makes sense.
I think on both sides, you can have strong cases against the other. Even serious ones like Donald Trump could be a threat to democracy without going overboard. And in fact, on the other side, I think the risk to Joe Biden is real. If you're saying that, they were saying that Joe Biden sent the FBI to raid Mar-a-Lago with guns in order to. I mean, there was pretty extreme rhetoric towards Joe Biden as well that puts him under threat. So I do think, as they always say in these moments, you got to try to cool the temperatures. But unfortunately, that type of thing only lasts, moments.
Well,
until
and here's the thing too, Jamie. It seemed like Trump was trying to cool the temperature, and I thought, look, if he ever did pivot toward unity and really go all in, that would be the most devious trick ever. But I don't think he can sustain it. I don't think Trump can sustain it. And let's look at a couple of things that have just happened just in the past few hours. Number one, you have this judge down in Florida, Eileen Cannon. She's a Trump appointee who's thrown out, at least for now, she has thrown out the classified documents case, arguing that the special counsel is unconstitutional. That is not going to cool things down. I mean, the idea that Trump would get away with keeping these classified documents and just he's immune to that or that. And then the other thing I think is again, this will be possibly an obsolete observation very shortly, but we've, speculation is now that Trump is not going to pick Doug Burgum, who's sort of a moderate pick. He's not going to pick Marco Rubio. The front runner as of the time we're recording this, and again, it'll be obsolete soon, is J.D. Vance. What message does that send? It's not one of unity and healing, I assure you.
Well, I would say the first one, I don't think we accept court decisions when we have, Obama appointees or appointees that you don't agree with their interpretation. It ultimately can go to the Supreme Court, I believe, and they can overturn her ruling. So, I mean, we have a process to get judges appointed, elections to get judges appointed, and then, you live with the decisions they make, and then, in some cases you can, as Roe v. Wade showed, you can reverse them years down the road if they're made poorly. But, if the left can't accept the decisions that are made by a court, then that's on them, I think.
I'm not the left. I'm a conservative, and I think I really think that what we are seeing is essentially nullification by a judge. Look, to me, I'm not a lawyer, nor am I a Secret Service agent, so it's all speculation today. But this seems egregious to me. And the only good news is I do think it could be reviewed or overturned.
But Matt, I mean, Roe v. Wade in 1972 was probably more egregious to your viewpoint. And the way to handle that was to play within the political process and, challenge the court later on if on the grounds of our past laws. This seems much less. I'm not an expert in the legal opinion of Judge Cannon, but I think the Supreme Court justices, even the conservative ones, are pretty reasonable people overall. Certainly, the Chief Justices.
Two of the four are reasonable.
Okay, well, in that case, then
the other two, one of them flies American flags upside down, and the other one has a wife who wants to overthrow the election.
That was a fun news cycle, wasn't it? The Alitos, what flags are outside of the Alito's house on any given day? That was a fun thing that was happening. I think there's a case to be made, and I'll let like the legal arguments be adjudicated by, actual lawyers and legal scholars. But I think there's probably a case to be made. Look, it's a 2 point thing. One, did Jack Smith and, this famously aggressive prosecutor who's had his famously aggressive prosecutions kind of blow back in his face from time to time, did he and Merrick Garland perhaps overstep? Did they invite the Supreme Court ruling on official acts by forcing the Supreme Court to rule on official acts? I don't know. That argument is out there. It's been made, I think, kind of persuasively by people like Jason Willick in the Washington Post. The other part of this, though, aside from the legal merits of all these cases, is what I wonder about is the political aspect of it and how it complicates democratic arguments that Trump is this threat to democracy. And look, he says he's going to put his opponents in prison, that he's going to prosecute his opponents. Putting that argument right up side by side, it's like, by the way, we also need to prosecute Trump in 4 different jurisdictions in cases that, some of them, like the documents case, seemed like the slam dunk one, and other cases that are more tenuous, such as the New York prosecution handled by Alvin Bragg here, our district attorney, which a lot of legal scholars, including on the left, say it's like, this was a pretty tenuous prosecution here. I think the Democrats, the whole lawfare strategy, I'm hesitant to use that word, but the whole legal strategy against Donald Trump, and I'm just going to go and pretend in my head now that it was just completely free, that it was completely free of any sort of political analysis, that the Justice Department, that the various prosecutors who have handled these cases did so only because they had the best intention. They were just doing their job as prosecutors. I still think that may create a certain issue for Democrats as they try to insist that this is the man who is going to end law and order in this country, and this is the man who's going to lock up his opponents.
Let's turn to Joe Biden. Until the assassination attempt and the start of the Republican convention, he was in this spiral of 2 or 3 weeks after that debate where people were calling on him. Democrats, George Clooney was calling on Joe Biden.
Yeah.
You can't win. Get out of the race. Throw the damn towel. Jamie, are we past that now? Is it Joe Biden or bust, or maybe Kamala? What do you think?
When's the Democratic convention in August? He has a live interview tonight. The question is whether what we saw on the debate stage and what we've seen in videos from time and time, several videos, is a one-time or a couple-time thing, or a condition that's going to get progressively worse. If it's a condition that's going to get progressively worse, it's unavoidable that there'll be another debate moment, another moment where he's going to look just not there or out of it. And if that happens, especially before the convention, again, what seems like toned down or now we've moved on from the idea that Joe Biden's going to be replaced is going to pick up again, and actually will get louder. I mean, if he has a real bad moment tonight, showing like he did in the debate, in that interview that he's doing, it's going to pick up again, for sure.
The burden of proof on whether this is a condition or is just a one-off moment, the burden of proof is on the White House and on the Biden campaign. And it's been 18 days now since the debate between Biden and Trump. The Biden campaign and the White House have been unable to prove that this isn't a condition, that this was just a one-off moment. They've just been unable to do so for whatever reason. I think what happened on Saturday will mute that for a bit, but Jamie is likely right, particularly, I mean, if we end this Republican convention with Trump really like outside the margin of error, leading in swing states, leading nationally, getting into that 5, 7, I guess, theoretically possible 10-point range, something like that, then I think, I mean, you make the move. I still think that Democrats will, if they're able to. I mean, they'll do anything that they can. Whether they're able to is a separate matter.
Yeah,
Joe
it's kind of
Biden might. Yeah, I mean,
a
this is.
decision.
Yeah, yeah, and if they can't gently push him out, I guess they're stuck with him. But going back to history again, sometimes replacing your nominee is a good idea. 1968, somebody pointed out, some Democratic consultant said, it's like, well, George Clooney doesn't mention that in 1968 the Democrats pushed aside their nominee, which didn't really happen, but like they pushed aside their nominee, they replaced their ticket, and then they lost in a landslide. Hubert Humphrey lost by less than a point to Richard Nixon in 1968. He certainly performed better than LBJ would have done. And if Robert Kennedy had won, if Robert Kennedy had been the Democratic nominee in 1968, it probably would have beaten Nixon. So, I mean, I don't see, there's not a lot of reason. If you're a Democrat, I don't see a lot of, I mean, what's the reasoning if you're a Democrat to not want Joe Biden gone? I mean, where is the evidence that Kamala Harris would be that much worse of a candidate? Why not just try somebody younger who can throw fresh punches, who doesn't have Joe Biden's particular liabilities? Just anyone else, give it a shot. It'd probably have to be Harris, but
the best candidate would obviously. I mean, did you see Josh Shapiro handle the press? The governor.
Wonderful. Yeah, he gave a wonderful press conference. Very impressive.
He's obviously probably the best candidate the Democrats, especially in this election with Pennsylvania being so important, could field. But obviously, there's almost no way that could occur. Harris Shapiro, which also serves as a law firm, a future law firm, Harris Shapiro after. But also a decent vice presidential ticket, especially with the
Harris Shapiro is a good ticket, and would I mean, the strongest argument, assuming it's J.D. Vance, what Axios said, it's like, well, the plan would be to just park J.D. Vance in Pennsylvania and have him use that theoretical blue collar appeal to just just keep him moving around Pennsylvania. Remind that those working white class voters who defected from Trump a little bit in 2020, that he's still their guy. But I mean, I find J.D. Vance's appeal, it's like, it's so on paper. It's like, how did he underperform DeWine? By like 10 points when he got elected in Ohio? And he was going against, a well-funded Democratic opponent, but he was going against Tim Ryan. He's not going against, one of the great political actors in American history here. So he won convincingly, but I don't know.
Vance? Yeah, I think look, we'll know by the time this is out probably who the nominee is.
Yeah,
I have a bet, probably 3 months old at this point, with the most well-sourced Trump reporter that I know, who was confident that J.D. Vance will be the nominee then. I find it so impossible. Nothing bad on J.D. Vance. You have your views of him. I'm not like making a commentary on J.D. Vance himself. It just makes zero political sense to choose J.D. Vance. It like totally. Who is this helping? It's only going to hurt him. It makes him. You could paint Donald Trump as part of the Sohrab Ahmari wing of the kind of new faction right in a certain way. That I don't think is evil, but it's like it paints it into a kind of a very, very, very ideological framework. I'm still saying, with all the evidence we have right now, it's going to be J.D. Vance. I still believe it's going to be a surprise, and it's going to be somebody who is not J.D. Vance, because it doesn't make sense. I'll add one last thing. A counterpoint to me is, apparently the night that the vice president is supposed to speak, the speakers before him are Don Jr., Tucker Carlson, and the mayor of East Palestine, which is pretty good evidence if you're going to line up a speaker list in support of J.D. Vance. I think those are the three exact people you would pick.
Yeah, they're not. Tucker Carlson isn't going to rev them up for Doug Burgum.
Or Nikki Haley's surprise pick.
Right. I mean, his strongest pick would probably be like Glenn Youngkin. That would be
that would be,
sure. Yeah, I mean, Youngkin would you had the Fox poll. You've had a few polls now that have Virginia in play, which would just be, game over. And Youngkin's a popular guy in Virginia. Youngkin is.
Give you breaking news while we speak.
Yes.
New York Times is reporting that J.D. Vance is the vice presidential.
Oh, all right. Well, Michael Brendan Doherty, I think, has done the best case for JD Vance. You can go and read that on National Review. I Basically, the idea is that he has an appeal to working class whites who Trump needs to keep on side. I guess the strategy will be, park JD Vance in Pennsylvania and some of the Rust Belt states, and then what? Then you have Trump just concentrate on getting those, independents, those swing voters, those double haters, stuff like that, and just have JD Vance shore up the right. Like
I got to tell you,
that's a classic kind of assembly of a presidential ticket. But
I got to tell you, the counterfactual though, with having the mayor of East Palestine, Tucker Carlson, and Don Jr. having to come in advance of Nikki Haley as VP, it's classic Trump. Make everybody who's like bend the knee, and you're going to have to eat it, and if you're on my team, you're going to have to. I'm the man who picks it, and you're going to give speeches in favor of Nikki Haley. I love that.
It would be just to humiliate all of those people. It's like, oh, Tucker, you thought about running against me, huh? Well, I got a plan for you.
Remember when Steve Bannon was like fired? Who did they send on TV to attack Steve Bannon? He sent on Stephen Miller, like Steve Bannon's like ally in the years before, to show that he was a Trump man, not a Bannon man, and he was willing to throw punches if Trump told him to. So that would have been a classic move. But apparently, unless something radically changes and it's a head fake, everyone's reporting.
I guess. All right. So I do see the logic to it, I guess, shoring up the right, but it seems very theoretical. It seems very much on paper. I don't know. Does he really have this great blue collar appeal? Can we quantify that in any kind of way?
I forget who said it. He's the pick you make if you're guaranteed to win. You're sure you're going to win the race, and you can pick anybody, and you wanted JD Vance because it doesn't matter. So maybe he's just so confident he's going to.
Donald Trump at his most confident is Donald Trump is certain that he's going to win the race. That is the Donald Trump who could lose the race.
All right, guys. I assume if we keep talking, there'll be more news that breaks that'll make this more obsolete. So we should probably call it a day. But thank you both for coming back, and let's do it again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
See you guys.